Right. Good evening to members and guests, both here in Percival House and remotely, and to the public watching on YouTube. So welcome to the first meeting of Scrutiny 5, the Strategy and Change Scrutiny Panel. This meeting is focusing on introducing the topic and also on our research collaboration. The agenda for the meeting is on the Ealing Council website, so if as a member of the public watching this, you Google Ealing Democracy, you'll be able to navigate to it from there. So maybe you're too far from the mic. Yes, so it's a hybrid meeting. In order for it to be quorum, there need to be at least 3 members of the committee present here, which we can certainly see there are plenty. So thank you very much for your attendance. So turning to the agenda, we begin with item 1, apologies for absence. I've received apologies from Councillor Young, who has another council commitment in one of the rooms over there, and also from Councillor Gallant, who was due to substitute for him but is now unable to. I just have a conversation with Councillor Young. If his meeting finishes first, he may join us for the end of this one. Does anyone know of any other apologies? I think we look like we're all here, don't we? No? Good. Item 2, urgent matters. There are none. Item 3, declarations of interest. So please let me know if you have any declarations. I don't see any, so it seems there are none. Item 4, matters to be considered in private. There are none. Item 5, panel terms of reference and work programme. Yes, so I don't know. Cornelia, do you want to say anything to introduce it, or don't have to? No, okay, fine. So we've got 3 things here. Firstly, we've got the terms of reference, which are in draft in Appendix 1. Do I see anyone wishing to comment on the terms of reference? No. So are the terms of reference agreed? Thank you. Next, we need to decide whether to co-opt anyone to the panel. Now, I haven't received any suggestions in advance, and if we decide not to make co-options, it of course doesn't preclude us from inviting people or organisations to present to us at particular meetings. So, does anyone want to suggest any co-options? Is Councillor Taylor, you're thinking?
It might be suggested. I have not, haven't even asked her. I'll consider it. You know, with the third one, his agenda. Exec from.
Oh, the.
Yes. No, the centre.
Yeah, there's Bob.
Barbara. Her name
From
is.
The basic.
Possibly. It's all.
Are you suggesting her as a co-option for the rest of the meetings, or just specifically for that one meeting?
Just specifically for that one.
Right. Okay. Edmund, yeah. Right. Okay. Well, I think really the context, if the context is for one particular meeting, then it wouldn't be a co-option, but it would be something for us to look at in terms of inviting them along to that meeting. So I think if we make a note of that, Cornelia, that's very helpful. So you're not got a mic on.
I thought I was loud enough, but yeah, somebody from our own tribunal, Citizens Tribunal, that's reporting.
Yeah, I think we did already think of that, didn't we? Yeah. Sorry.
I was going to ask, is that for the January 2025 meeting? Yeah. Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Clarify something. Can we co-opt anybody at any time in future, or does it need to be now? Or would we be co-opting for specific meetings, or would it be for the whole year?
Okay, so there's a slight distinction. So when we co-opt someone, they're then invited to attend every meeting or every remaining meeting of the panel. So if we co-opt someone today, then they'd be invited to all 3 remaining members. meetings. We could co-opt someone later, but obviously the later you do it, the less meetings have left. But if it's in the context of a specific meeting, it's probably better to, rather than formally co-opt, it's better to just invite them to present to us or to contribute at that meeting.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so I think I'm not hearing a move for a formal co-option, but I have heard useful suggestions for one of the other meetings. Thanks. So next we have the outline work programme, which is Appendix 3, and note that as well as this meeting and the other 3 meetings of the panel, there are proposals for site visits to community engagement events in other boroughs to inform meeting 2, and good practice work with asylum seekers and refugees to inform meeting 3. So do I have any comments on the work programme? Any suggestions for anything that could be added? Yes, Councillor Taylor.
So just in terms of the timings, it's like, obviously don't know the agendas yet, but what can we expect? Because I don't know this timeline of the Citizens Tribunal. So would there be, I wouldn't want to just know about it, but it's about what progress has been made. So we'd want to get some kind of progress report. I don't know the status of it. I'm just saying something that's worthwhile bringing at that stage.
Yes, I mean, I think the feeling was that the timing was okay, but I don't know. Do you know, Cornelia, is there information on that, or sorry?
Sorry, it's just that I was at the work programme planning meeting with you, and I think the timing was kind of considered right for those items, but it's something that can be revisited at every pre-meeting that we have to make sure that the panel is still on schedule with what's actually going on within the directorate.
Okay, thanks. Right, so yeah, so in the absence, I think, but are we content to agree the work programme? Great, good. So next we move on to item 6, strategy and change directorate overview. So I'd like to invite Amanda Askham, strategic director, strategy and change, to introduce directorate, and the presentation for this was in the papers, in the original papers. Thanks.
Lovely. Is that working? Thank you very much, Councillor Ball. So first one of these committees for the Strategy and Change Directorate, we thought it would be useful just to start with an overview of what's in the Directorate and what do we do. So I've provided as part of the presentation a structure chart so you can see the actual people and the teams that sit there. But in the report, I've tried to give more of a feel of what we do and what we work on across the Directorate, because all of these teams work with each other and work with the rest of the organisation. We are a corporate directorate, so we sit in the centre of the organisation and work with all other service directorates. So the first responsibility really of the directorate is lots of the things that make sure that we are corporate responsibilities that make sure we are running the council well, that we're efficient, compliant, that we're productive, that we look at all our opportunities for making things better. And there's a range of services in there that you can see in the report, including our human resources, health and safety, our performance management, and our equality, diversity, inclusion. So that's a set of corporate services that make sure we do things properly and make sure that we're a good organisation and run well. We then have a whole set of teams and people who are looking at our strategic and policy approaches. So that might be thinking about legislation that's coming to us nationally, internationally, wherever it's coming from. What does that mean for us and our residents in the borough? So that's an interpretation of policy married up with the administration's council plan to make sure that we're delivering the vision of the council. So there's a lot of people in that service who are doing analytical work, working with communities, gathering sort of lived experience, research and insight, and that informs the decisions that we're making. So a set of people in there. Then we're looking at our connected communities vision, and that's ensuring that our communities really are at the heart of decision making and have a voice in everything that we do. You'll see in there our change and transformation team who work closely. You'll hear a little bit more about that in our second item today. We've got the Community Development Service who work closely with the Race Equality Commission. and in our equalities work, and we've also got lots of work with BCS partners and our grant giving. Also in there is our asylum seeker and refugee support, which we are coming back to at a later meeting. So lots in there that's very community facing, lots of outward facing teams. We have the communications team sits in strategy and change to talk about all of that work that we're doing across the council. And then lastly, I have a set of responsibilities where I lead major pieces of work for the organisation and have some accountability across the council for making sure that these things go well. So there's a whole set of things in there that I'm very happy to take any questions on. And then I also just wanted to run you through the council's strategic framework, but maybe shall I pause at this point?
I think that would be helpful. So yeah, so are there any questions on the directorate as a whole and what Amanda's just gone through? I can throw one in while people are thinking. Yeah, so the sort of the very last bit over on the right, the corporate programs. So the is there I guess two-part question really. Is it so how much of that is about new change programs, and to the extent that it is, does it involve both sort of new directions that the council's moving in, and also changes due to cost issues where we're downsizing services?
Yeah, so actually that piece on the side, which is corporate programs, we have a set of 5 corporate programs which really draw together pieces of work that might go on in different directorates otherwise. So we've got a digital corporate program where we might have one team or service that's improving digital transactions or different channels for residents to use to contact us. We might have another who are using a system for housing repairs. So we have that digital corporate program to make sure that we're learning from each other, and we think, well, if that works in children's, it might also work in adults. So those corporate programs are more about bringing together those pieces of work. In the middle there, you've got the strategy and change teams, and that's really where our new change work comes from, and that can originate from anywhere across the organisation. It comes into what we call our change partnership, because that's a place where we work closely with communities, and we look at lots of little projects that we can test out ideas and experiment and make sure that we're heading on the right things. But our change work is set by the council plan, so that's our strategic vision, and then we decide what we need to do to be in that future state. But also, as you said, Councillor Ball, by our medium-term financial strategy. So we might think actually we need to have a different service for that in the future, which needs to deliver better outcomes at less cost. How do we do that through our change work? So that's driven in that piece, whereas the corporate programmes are more about common themes across the whole council.
Thanks. Yeah, so I identified the wrong bit on the org chart, but I think you helpfully answered the question. Yeah, so that's right.
Yeah. I was just looking at, thank you first of all for your presentation. That was very informative and useful. I was looking at the subheading Future of Work and AI Legitimacy. I was just wondering if you could say a bit more about how we're recruiting or training current staff and updating, because this is, you know, it's developing very rapidly. I just wondered where we're at. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a very interesting question. So we understand from colleagues across the sector and from our own digital and ICT teams that the AI is going to be the thing that makes us, it's the most significant jump forward since the internet. So we needed to have a place where we could say, is that really true? What does it mean for us? And in terms of our workforce, some of our workforce are quite anxious about being replaced by AI. What does that look like for them? So we thought we would set up a future of work programme which said, what are the things that we really do want to automate, if you like, or use AI for, and what are the things that we really want to use the human kind of judgment and interface for? So we're doing lots of case usage without getting too technical. There's 2 kinds of AI that we're looking at. So one is generative AI, which people are more familiar with. You might look at ChatGPT or something like that and think, can you generate me a piece of work around preparing for a scrutiny committee, and it might help you do that. And then predictive AI takes a set of data and says what's likely to happen. So we're thinking about how we might use some of that in terms of planning our services for the future. But then the legitimacy piece is making sure testing with our communities and our residents and our service users to say, is this right for us to use your data in this way and to be predictive? What are the ethics around that? Are we making too many assumptions? So it's an important ethical piece of work to do it carefully and not just start using AI on an ad hoc basis.
I think there's various different boroughs that are progressing at different stages. I just wondered if you are, linking up, connecting with other boroughs, or if you're working in partnership with any particular borough, because I think this is something that we can really work together on as local authorities and pool our resources.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are part of something called LOTI, which is the London Office of Technology and Innovation. And most councils in London are part of LOTI, and we get together regularly with an AI group on that and say, what are you using it for? What are your use cases? What can we use it for? What can we learn? Because there's so much possibilities around this. So yes, we do that. And we're also joining up with some different kind of sectors across the country, because we want to know what can be done beyond local government. There might be things that we're not thinking about, uses in the private sector and things like that. So we are doing as much sort of exploration as we can around pieces of AI work.
Can I just come in on that as well, actually? So not so much sort of ethics of AI as a kind of risk issue, that you've got the issue with generative AI that it can hallucinate things. So when you're dealing with, obviously most council services are dealing with, hugely important issues for many of our residents. What safeguards are we introducing that that mean that we can trust that the information isn't hallucinating?
Yeah, so I think the answer to that really is we're stepping carefully in and looking at the different use cases and really testing them carefully. And we've started a Copilot, which is Microsoft's version of AI. We're doing a pilot on that in a centre of excellence where we're testing it internally. And I would say at the moment we are finding that quite a lot of the transactional recording, reporting, taking minutes, recording actions, things like that, it is fairly accurate for. We are not as yet using it into that kind of deeper use case where we're using our residents' data and using generative AI to make assumptions about that. And I think we're probably a reasonably long way from that and testing it carefully before we do.
Yeah, thank you. Possibly ought to declare an interest, as you mentioned, Copilot. I worked on a commercial for Copilot for Microsoft, so probably got to stick that in as a declaration. Good. Okay, thanks. Any other questions to this part, or shall we? Oh yeah, Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, I must admit, Amanda, I put in Copilot the other day, write me a council speech, came up with nothing. So, but mind you, got to have something in there. I guess the starting point for this, when he's structuring, is looking at what was going wrong first. So it's about what outcomes you want to get out of it as well. And I'm trying to think, perhaps, and it's not putting a spot. I mean, it's just I think what's the benefit for a resident at the end of this, as well as the council, with the work that's going on. How does it improve their lives? In
terms of the AI work, particularly. Or this, yeah, the AI. So I think at the moment a lot of the transactional work can be speeded up. So when residents contact us and they want an answer to something relatively simple, we can now. There are lots of organisations. You mentioned other boroughs that are using it. Lots of them are using it for chatbots. So they can source a lot of the information very quickly from our various databases. So you can go on as a resident and find something out very quickly. Same for things like FOIs and complaints. So we hope that residents will see a much quicker response in terms of questions that we get again and again and again. That, of course, doesn't replace the questions that are more complex and where we have to have a human looking over it and thinking about it. And I think I should stress that we never just use AI. So we would always use, as you say, you can say write a council speech, you need then to read it and see what it's written and think, is this fit for purpose? So we would never just use AI without some review.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Councillor Newstab.
It might be wholly inappropriate for me to contribute here, but if you bear with me, Chair. I mean, two examples just within the adult social care space are a piece of technology that allows social workers to capture the case notes and the discussion that they're having with a client much more effectively and quickly. Obviously, they're using their years of experience and knowledge of that person in order to capture the best care package for them. But that then allows them to spend more time with the resident rather than going back to the office and filling in forms and all of that sort of area. But equally, in the finance piece, where we have to monitor our spend and our and the market and the multiplicity of different prices in our market across domiciliary care and care homes, we're now able to use AI to predict how much we will spend in year, which is incredibly important when we think that's pretty much half the budget for the whole council. So we're not relying on that at the moment, but it is tracking to within 1 or 2% of the work that is being done manually. Now, if you can free up all of that kind of grunt work, if you like, for those people to be doing much more analytical, people-focused work, then I think we can see real benefits, not just in the cost saving, but where they're able to add that human element, which is absolutely always going to be front and centre of what we do. So that's just two examples in adult social care of where we're experimenting with elements of AI and great use of technology.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful. So if there are no more questions for Amanda on this part, I'd like you, Amanda, to move on to the Council Strategic Framework, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Bolt. So this one slide is trying to capture the complexity of planning across a big organisation that does 200 and
probably ideally should have the
services
slide up, shouldn't we? So we've got it in our packs, but just for people who are watching at home, don't know.
Would you like me to? I know that women are supposed to be able to multitask really well, but I might have to just pause for a minute and find the slide.
I know it's only one slide, but I thought when you had the org chart up, but it's kind of you'd already got some way through before I thought about it. But probably ought to really. I don't know if we've got anyone watching online, but other than obviously our speakers later on. If it's difficult, I mean, I'd say it's only one slide, so we don't need to wait a long time.
If you just give me one,
sure.
I can find.
Yeah, that's right.
Sorry, I have it here.
Yeah, great. There you go. Right. Yeah, great.
Okay.
Great. Thanks very much. Thanks.
That's all right. So this is trying to capture how we flow from our strategic vision right through to our individual service and team strategies. So the strategic vision is our overarching, this is where we want to get to in the future. Many of the things that we do around social innovation and change are generational, will take a long time to kick in. So we think about our long-term goals very hard and that future state of the council, and we set a time span for that, which might be the 4-year term of administration. For some things we might be saying we think this will take 10 years, 20 years. So that strategic vision is very clearly set within a time frame. We have the council plan, which describes political priorities over a 4-year cycle, and that flows from The strategic vision and the council plan talk to each other all the time, so that sort of sits that piece of time within the longer term. And then we have that key set of activities that we're going to need to do to work on to reach that desired future state. So we think about what are all the actions we need to take, what are they going to cost us, what sort of teams do we need, what sort of workforce do we need, and the skills. So we look at all those activities flowing out of that longer term planning and put those into our medium term financial strategy. So that describes 3-4 years of our financial performance, given the resources that we need to spend to deliver what we want to do. And then, as you'd expect, we have a whole set of strategies that sit within that, whether that's a digital strategy, whether that's our theory of change, whether it's our partnership agreement with health or our work with VCS. So we look at all of that and say, what does that set of strategies look like, and how do we put those together to deliver this activity? And then we dig down into service plans. So that's individual services thinking. You know, if I look at the performance management team in my area, they will have a service plan that says this is what we'll need to deliver this year to make sure that we stay on track for that longer term vision. And then we measure all that. So our performance management framework says, how do we know that we're delivering the things that we say we do? How do we know that they're having the impact we intended? Where do we need to change things or put more into that so that we can reach that long-term vision? So at any point, all those 6 elements are going. At the top, we see a longer term on those, but you will see once we get down to the strategies, they might be reviewed every year. Sometimes service plans are every quarter. We look at our performance at least quarterly. In some areas where we have very high spend, like adults and children's, we look at that performance monthly. So there's a lot of activity just to make sure that we keep linking back to what we say we're going to do for residents in the borough.
So do I have any questions on the strategic framework? Yes, Councillor Taylor. Yeah.
It's probably not a question. It might be a comment if someone has worked in local government. But that framework's been the same, more or less, hasn't it? It's no different. It's always been like that's not criticism. It's not. Yeah, it was just because I was thinking about the other previous slide. I think is something changed here, but that's kind of the template we would normally use.
I think that's true, but unless all of those elements are there and good, it falls apart quite quickly. So sometimes if you don't have an annual set of plans or you don't know where you're going on a particular strategy, then the whole thing can collapse quite quickly. So yes, you're absolutely right. This is just what a good council strategic framework looks like. And the test of it is, could any of us at any point say, right, show me that set of strategies or show me that set of service plans? But you're absolutely right.
Thank you. I'll throw one in. I was at a meeting of the London Scrutiny Network the other week, and one of the things that we're talking about is the information that's useful for scrutiny. And I can't remember which borough there was at least one borough that has monthly budget trackers that go to scrutiny. I was wondering if you think it would be helpful to have. You mentioned that there are quarterly and monthly trackers for certain areas. Do you think there's information in there that would be useful for the scrutiny function? I mean, I guess it would be for OSC rather than this panel, but yeah.
So my understanding, and actually colleagues from Democratic Services might be able to help me here, I think OSC does look at financial reporting fairly regularly.
Not monthly.
It does look at it. It does look at it regularly, but as you say, not monthly. Perhaps that might be something you'd want to raise with the new chair of OSC.
Yeah. Thanks. Oh, sorry. Yes, you wanted to add. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you, Councillor. I was just going to come back in and say that for the Strategy and Change Directorate, I have a set of key performance indicators that I monitor, and I don't know whether that is useful information for this scrutiny committee. That really just tells us if the work of this directorate is on track, but that does give us then some information as it sits in the sort of corporate centre and supports lots of other directorates, would tell us about how performance is looking across the piece. So very happy to include that if that's helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be useful for this panel, wouldn't it? So I can see hands going up there. Yeah, Councillor Shaw, yeah.
Hello. I just wondered if you could say a bit more about how different teams communicate? Because there's bound to be projects where they can work together or they can share information. And so how do you encourage that kind of interrelationships between the different teams and share information, and so that you optimize on the resources we have?
That's a great question, one of my favourite topics. So we are taking an approach, particularly around our change work, to using, in the IT world, you'd call it an agile framework, where you're looking at squads, and we sometimes call it multidisciplinary teams in local government, where we would say, this is the thing we want to work on, who are the right people to draw in across the organisation. So our change partnership, I mentioned earlier, that's the place where we start our change initiatives. We would always bring that to our strategic leadership team, where all the strategic directors and chief executive are, and we would say, who are the right people to get around this particular question and to start doing the research. We quite often go out to our VCS partners and say, what do you understand about the residents of the borough, and how do we bring our VCS colleagues into that multidisciplinary team? There might be, we're doing an interesting piece of work at the moment about crisis intervention, where we're bringing in lots of public sector partners, might be in health, but it might also be organisations like Mind, who understand a lot about our homelessness issues in the place. So we're bringing in lots of different people into that multidisciplinary team, and within the directorate we do exactly the same. So that sort of top line of boxes is my directorate management team, and we will always consider our work together. So we meet twice a month and we say, what are the things coming up? Who do we pull out of the various pieces to work on this? And it's always different because the questions are always quite different.
I think Councillor Taylor, will you indicate as well?
Yeah, I think I'm just picking up on that last point, Amanda, and I think your offer of here coming. I wanted to see the outputs. I think it's more about the outcomes, and maybe thinking about the joint working would be more effective. So actually, because we can all do the outputs, that's easy, but it's the outcomes is what we want to see, and evaluation of some of the projects, and bring it alive really about what the work they're doing. I can't comment on OSC because I'm not on it, but if you want to be a performance monitoring board, that's entirely up to you. but I think certainly, I think something would be useful to bring here, definitely, but it might come up in the later meetings, of course, as well. So.
Yeah, I don't know if any other members have got comments on that specific point, on what we should be, what it's useful for us to be asking for from Amanda specifically for this panel, whether it's helpful to have, as you say, outputs or outcomes. Neither. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, Amanda.
Yeah, it might just be worth adding that the performance indicators that we look at in strategy and change are really measures of impact. They're not measures of output. So we are looking at things. We're not counting how many times we've done something. We're thinking about what difference it's making. So the performance indicators are very much framed in that way anyway.
Right. Well, I think it sounds like it would be useful to have a, just like a brief update report that had those in the 3 remaining meetings, which, obviously you're preparing it anyway, so it's not something that's a lot of work. So would people agree with that? Yeah. Great. Good. Thanks. So yeah, thanks very much, Amanda. Yes. So if we don't have any more questions on that, so the final substantive item is item 7, the health determinants research collaboration. So I'm delighted to welcome Councillor Polly Newstub, Cabinet Member for Healthy Equal Lives, who will introduce the research project, and then we'll hear more detail from our academic partners. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing me to introduce this. I'll try not to steal all of Amanda's thunder, but needless to say, this is an enormously exciting project, and it's a huge testament to the work of our teams and the community-led approach that we already deploy, and some of which you'll see play out in Amanda's directorate. And it also reflects a really strong relationship that we have with our community organisations, and Shamaki is online, who is at Gossard and one of our key partners in the project. So really the National Institute of Health Research project and their sort of mindset is rooted in a very clear understanding that achieving better health outcomes really needs to focus on prevention and effective research and working with communities more effectively than, say, the NHS has done as a standalone organisation. And generally, it's very sad to say that we're seeing life expectancy drop in Ealing. That's a slight trend overall, but really that there's a disparity in living well as that life expectancy itself. We know that our public health strategy is very rooted in understanding the building blocks of health and understanding that there are a whole range of things that contribute to our ability to be well and to live long, happy and independent lives. And this really allows us to accelerate the work that we've been doing in that space. The Health Determinants Research collaboration is exciting because it is a different approach to how we form and build relationships as a local authority, and it focuses really on how we can learn more within a community-based and academic framework, so that local authorities who, we know a lot about our people, but how we can effectively use that information and partner with residents and communities to build in better outcomes for people. So as I said, it's very exciting that have that collaboration and that opportunity to explore all of those areas and to really build a dedicated research methodology within the borough that will upskill us all and support our local authority, but other local authorities to improve the health of all of our residents in conjunction with our residents themselves. So I'll hand over to you, Amanda, and I hope that leaves you something to add.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. And I would echo Councillor Newsub's excitement about this piece of work. It really is the reason we were successful in the bid is because we took a view that this had to be a genuine collaboration. It had to be three sides of the triangle, which were all equal in how we share this work. So I'm just going to give you a few slides about the background and what is in the research collaboration, and then I'm going to make sure that our academic and voluntary sector partners who have joined us tonight have a good time to talk to you as well, because this is very much in the spirit of our collaboration. So the National Institute for Health and Care Research, these collaborations were set up to boost capacity after COVID, where there was a lot of sense of we needed to take a different view to the wider determinants of health. We needed to fund more research. We needed to understand what was really happening. There was a cohort of 13 launched in 2022, and we applied for the second cohort with lots of learning from that first cohort, lots of support from partners in that space. And we are the only successful London borough in this round. So there are now 24 health research collaborations, and now there is 4 of us in London. So we work very closely in that network of research collaborations, sharing lots and lots of learning. The bid took us about 2 months to write. It was complex and we wanted it to be right and we wanted it to be brilliant. We got such good feedback from the panel about the way that we had put it together, the way that we presented with our colleagues, and it really did feel like a deep collaboration sort of before it had even started. So we want to carry that on, and we want to make sure that we do something with this wonderful collaboration. We want to make sure that it really does have an impact. You'll see there on the slide that we have 3 of our academic institutions. We've got Elizabeth with us tonight, and then we've got 3 very strong community organisations. And we're working very carefully to pull people into this collaboration and to make sure that we all learn from each other. We've had a number of workshops. I think probably, I don't know, colleagues online might want to reflect this later. I would say that in the first workshop, we were all speaking slightly different languages, coming from slightly different places, sort of saying this is what I need. It has moved on from that position, and we're beginning to talk a common language, and we're beginning to think about what are the right pieces of research we need to do for the borough. I'm not going to read through this, but particularly on the aims on the left-hand side of the slide there, and I know Councillor Newsub's already mentioned several of these, but this is really about a deep culture change for us in the council, making sure that we are listening hard to communities that we are taking the very best academic recommendations on how we do research, and really making sure that our evidence that informs us, our research and insight, takes us to the things that are really important for our communities. This is a very busy slide, but when people say, can you just put it on one slide and send it to me? This is the one that we would usually use, because we're talking there about the different work streams that we're working on at the moment. This is a 5-year project, and we're setting these up at different paces depending on what we need. And there are some outputs taking on board the previous comment about not wanting to see outputs. We will perhaps think about reframing those as the outcomes when we get there, but we're thinking about those outputs, making sure that we have a really good infrastructure to build on, and then we're really clear about the impact that we're going to have by doing that work. So we're constantly checking around those 3 circles, saying, are we still doing the right work streams? Are we still having the impact we intend to? And talking a lot about what sits within those different work streams. We are 6 months into a 5-year piece of work. And I think it's safe to say we spent the first 6 months learning about each other, setting out some of the infrastructure we need, recruiting to some of the roles that we need, sorting out our partnership agreements, so that we are ready to start the research piece of work. And then this is just a bit of a summary of where we expect to be at the end of the 5 years. There's such a lot sitting in here, but what we really wanted to say is, what difference is it going to make for the people that we're doing this for? So there is something about our own capacity, but the very first people we're doing this for is the residents of the borough. And we're really thinking about how this will support health equity. So what's going to change because of this research? I'll just pause for a second on there, and of course we'll be happy to take any questions. We're going to talk next about and we've presented it in lots of places, so we're doing lots of learning, lots of talking about it, and drawing in lots of people to help us hone our practice here. We're going to hand over to Elizabeth, our academic partner, to talk about cultures of evidence. So I don't know whether, would you rather do this in sections? Do you want to pause and ask any questions about the setup, or should we just
I think it's probably better to hear the whole,
okay,
hear the presentation from everyone and then have questions at the end, because sometimes what we find is the questions preempt what one of the other people are going to say with any more detail. So yeah.
Absolutely. So I'll hand over to Elizabeth to introduce herself. And Elizabeth, I am driving the slides, so a little nod and I'll do your next slide when it's ready.
Fantastic, Amanda. If you can move on, I think there's one that has the building blocks of health on it and introduces the project. Great, fabulous. All right, thank you for having me tonight. My name is Elizabeth McGill. I'm an assistant professor in public health evaluation at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and I'm the co-lead here for the action and evaluation work stream. And so as part of this work, what we're trying to do is really generate kind of a baseline understanding of how Ealing is currently using evidence. And this really drives at the heart of kind of the ethos of what the HDRCs were set up to do. So I've got here a quote on the slide, but the NIHR envisaged these collaborations as being really an opportunity and a vehicle to embed a culture of always using evidence when making decisions. And I think evidence can mean lots of different things to different people. So I think it's useful to say up front that we take a very broad view of what we mean by evidence. So in addition to research evidence and kind of academic evidence, we're also interested in information and data and insight that's gathered from a range of different sources, directly from residents of the borough, as well as other local authorities, as well as national evidence. And we're trying to understand how is all that different breadth of evidence currently being collected and analyzed in Ealing to inform decisions. Next slide, please. So what we're doing here right now is conducting kind of a discrete project that's trying to understand how at this baseline, as we're embarking on the 5 years of the HDRC, how is Ealing right now using evidence? And our idea is that we're conducting this discrete kind of piece of research to develop this baseline assessment that will then be able to use to inform what sorts of actions we take within the HDRC over the next kind of 4.5 years. And then just to kind of position this where this sits within the HDRC, our idea is to kind of repeat repeat this at the end of the HDRC to understand what impact actually have all of that activity of the HDRC made to using evidence. So again, I won't read out the slide the way Amanda also has skipped, because we have a lot of kind of aims and objectives, but the fundamental heart of this piece of research is about understanding what constitutes evidence, what sort of resources are there available in ELING to generate, interpret, and apply evidence, what are their kind of different types of analytical methods that are being used, where's there good practice already occurring within the council, but also where are there potentially some challenges and barriers that we can use the investments and the kind of enthusiasm that's behind the HDRC to really drive change to improve health and reduce inequalities across the borough. Next slide, please. So in terms of this research, it's being led by colleagues from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. We all have expertise in evaluation, but also in evidence use in local settings. And this work is being overseen by a group that includes council colleagues as well as Char McKay as a community sector representative. And this group is going to be working to co-produce a series of recommendations that will inform future plans within the HDRC. Next slide, please. So in terms of the scope of the research, obviously this could be a very large project, but equally we want to generate findings that allow us to actually to orient ourselves to creating change within the next several years. So the emphasis is really on how evidence is used to inform strategy and policy and major policy decisions rather than interrogate day-to-day decisions within services. So our approach to doing this is we're conducting in-depth case studies of 2 strategies that are really focused on the building blocks of health. So thinking about those broader determinants that really fundamentally shape the health of individuals as well as our broader communities. And then we're also taking a higher level view to look across the different council functions and within different directorates to get this kind of both an in-depth understanding, as I said, through the strategy development, but also think more broadly across different corporate functions. Next slide, please. So how we're doing this, we've got a range of different methods. We're conducting a series of a documentary analysis. So we're looking and identifying kind of publicly available strategies, plans, policies, cabinet reports, etc., and looking at the different types of evidence that are utilized within these reports, which allows us to understand both the breadth of the evidence, but also potentially to identify evidentiary gaps. So where is evidence either not available that would be useful for informing decisions, or where is that evidence of not potentially sufficient quality? And where are there opportunities to improve the quality of that evidence? We're also undertaking a number of interviews and focus groups and this is ranging across the council in terms of elected members, senior leaders, as well as officers and practitioners. And this allows us to identify kind of shared understandings of what constitutes evidence, how it's used, how it's interrogated, as well as look at opportunities to improve kind of practice across the council. We're also observing meetings, both those that are public facing as well as internal meetings within the council, to see how evidence in its different forms is kind of discussed, how it's weighed, how it's debated, and how it fundamentally moves decisions forward. And then after we kind of conduct this initial period of data collection, we're developing a questionnaire that's going to be distributed across the council. So that's really to ensure that we have a breadth across the entire council to really get at how evidence is being used. And then we will complete the piece of work by co-producing a series of recommendations about what the HDRC can do to improve and enhance and highlight kind of best practice across the council. Next slide, please. So in terms of the outputs, what we're planning from this work is an internal report that kind of characterize what this baseline system of evidence creation and use is, a series of recommendations that we can then implement over the subsequent kind of 4 years, and then also some academic outputs on evidence use in local governments. And we're particularly interested in developing a kind of typology about the real breadth of types of evidence that exist and are used and valued in local settings. And next slide, just for the last one. In terms of where we are, we started this work as soon as the HDRC got underway. We've had ethics approval from the London School. We spent a significant amount of time introducing the study and the HDRC as a whole within the council. I've been to each of the directorates to present the work and really get buy-in. And I've been really enthused by the level of interest in this work, and particularly yeah, kind of colleagues interested in learning and learning from each other across different directorates, as well as looking to other areas about where we can bring in kind of best practice in evidence use. We're right now in the main stages of data collection. So colleagues and I are often at Percival House talking to colleagues and running focus groups and interviews. We'll be beginning our analysis at the end of this summer, and then through the autumn, we will be producing our outputs and starting to implement the recommendations. So that's it from me, and I'm very happy to take any questions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, as I said, we'll take the questions at the end, I think. But, yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Professor.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And now I'm just going to introduce Sharmake, who's going to talk about research capacity in voluntary and community sector. And Sharmake has been with us since the very first grueling interview to win the funding.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, thanks.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Amanda. So my name is Sharmake Diri. I'm the programs lead at Golden Opportunity Skills and Development. Just quickly about the charity. This charity was set up in 2003 by 3 young people in Ealing, and they all came from kind of migrant communities. So at the moment, as of last year, we've supported about 1,800 residents, and our work supports communities that speak about 15, 16 different community languages. So we work, for example, with the Nepalese community, with the recently arrived refugees from Syria, and we do a wide variety of projects. And I think it's quite telling that the council is now engaging so well and appropriately with the civil society organizations, because this hasn't been the case in the past. We have to admit that. Looking at the kind of race equality kind of commission report, and also looking at the ideas around the 7 towns. So we're seeing a lot of collaborative kind of engagement with the sector. And when we got involved with this program, we found that it was a kind of a very genuine way of working with the sector, and we got involved from the beginning, as Amanda mentioned, up to the point of the interviews, and I think it just showed that when you bring something from the ground, because we work with the residents, we see on a daily basis the different kind of issues that they face. So it's very, very important that we see that translating into what the council wants to do. And just as an example, we support people who are homeless, for example, maybe 600-700 people every year. And as you know, we have to advocate for those people who are homeless. And the way we engage with the council is more of a kind of person-centered approach. So we know there's a lot of pressure on the council, and we try to work with them. And of course, housing is one of the determinants of health. So it's quite important that we take the views and aspirations of our residents. And the participatory action research is actually an amazing process that actually looks at power dynamics. It kind of looks at how to elevate people's opinion and views and turning them into kind of interventions or even strategies, as Amanda was talking about earlier on, in terms of how the council, is working on their own priorities and strategies. So it's quite important that this approach has been chosen, and I think it's something that's going to permeate through hopefully other ways, the way the council wants to kind of look at research. So with participatory action research, it actually looks at how you're able to engage residents who, we build the capacity and they're able actually to do the research themselves. Because what's better than learning from people who are affected by different things? So for example, any strategy that the council puts together, of course, has to be understood by the residents. And I think doing it this way is a kind of a bottom-up approach, which I hope that if the council does other things in the future, it will be able to do this. And also, this takes away from the kind of traditional way of doing research. We know, for example, in the past, where we've been asked to do some surveys with our beneficiaries, and we've always said to the council that surveys are not enough. More needs to be done in terms of actually engaging with residents to make sure their opinions are Because if you do, for example, if you do some kind of surveys online, we know there's a lot of residents who are digitally excluded. You've got a lot of residents who English not their first language. So I think this process and the way it's been kind of designed and also supported by Institute of Development Studies, will be able actually to reach out to residents, offer them that kind of opportunity to to conduct research, and the idea is to highlight some of the key issues that are coming up from residents, and I think that'd be the best way for any kind of any type of recommendations that can come across to actually improve residents' health. So that's me in brief. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you very much, Shamake. Do we have questions? I've got one. Yes. Sorry, Councillor Gordon, did you have your? Yes.
Thank you for the presentations. A couple of things which I don't quite understand or I'm missing. I don't quite see. This is a 5-year piece of work. We had a timeline for 1 year. What happens in years 2 to 5? Does the work keep going? That's one. And the other thing, I haven't heard about the NHS or any of the health partners beyond the academic side. Can we have a bit more information? Are the local health partners involved in this project?
Yeah, so I'm happy to start with that, and I don't know if any colleagues want to come in. So the year's timeline was for the particular project for the cultures of evidence piece, and that's one of the projects that sits within the 5-year plan. So the 5-year plan, if we go back to that, our plan on a page, we've got those different work streams that we're going through, and that 1 year piece just sits within it. So very happy to share the sort of timeline as we have it at the moment. In fact, I think it's in the original cabinet report, and there is a link in my report to that if you want to go back and look at that 5-year plan across the piece. And the second question about health partners, NHS partners. So the Health and Wellbeing Board is very closely linked into this, and we talk about this work there. They are not one of our sort of triangle of partners, if you like, because we as a council have a responsibility to report into the Health and Wellbeing Board in any case, and we bring in lots of our health partners through the research work that we're doing as and when we pick up those different pieces of work. I don't know, Elizabeth Sharmake, did you want to add anything on that?
I think just to add about partially that the work that is going to go on in years 2 through 5 is currently being defined, and part of that is some of that is being defined through the work that is coming out of the cultures of evidence. But there's also a workforce needs assessment that's going on that will define kind of the modules that are going to be rolled out to staff and identify where there are specific training needs. So there's a lot of work that's going on in year 1 that defines then a lot of the activities that will take place in the subsequent years.
Yeah, so in terms of participatory action research, so there'll be a process of actually co-designing some of those kind of questions or ideas that we want to kind of work with communities, residents to conduct the research. And I think, it's the way, what I like about the HDRC program is that, we, according to evidence, we're able to do more stuff. So I think for the first 2 years, it will be setting the scene, but also to develop residents to start doing the research. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. And yeah, so Councillor Newster, you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just at that point about the NHS really. I mean, I chair the Health and Wellbeing Board, and it is fascinating to see that all of the different partners that are part of that. And while of course we think of the NHS as being the key sort of determinant of health in our communities, we and Anna Bryden, who is our public health director, would probably brain me for not remembering the exact percentage, but I think the estimates are something like the determinants of health are something around between 70 and 80%. The NHS can fix us and can offer that medical response, but actually the things that determine our health and our longevity and our well-being are those building blocks of health, which are our housing, our environment, our access to good jobs, our access to good education. So those are the kinds of things that this project inhabit the spaces that this project and this series of projects will be inhabiting. So while the NHS are obviously absolutely crucial to that, this is really looking at the underpinning things that underpin our ability to access a healthy life, really.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mohan.
I'll start with a comment in terms of winning the funding. Congratulations, well done. I hope it's not too late. Great achievement. There's mention of a communities board. Could you please say more about this board and how does it work? And one simple piece of information, there is mention of a short film on the YouTube. Do we know the name of this film? Thank you.
So there is a link, I think, in the, if there's not a link in the report to the film, I'll make sure that I send one. I think it's in there, but I'll check. Sharmake, did you want to come in on the communities board?
Yeah, hi. So in terms of supporting this project, so we have ourselves in GOSAD, then you have Southern Community Alliance, and then Ealing and Hounslow CVS. And I think the idea about the community board is some work around also scrutiny to actually make sure that some of the work is actually done, but also contribution from people in the community, but also this civil society organizations.
Thank you.
Councillor Haley.
Amanda, thank you for that presentation. So I'm just a little bit confused. I want to understand, and Shamaka also mentioned working with the local communities, and he mentioned different communities. What I want to know is how many voluntary sectors, different partners are we working with? And in here it says there will be interviews in the research. So how then, what sort of question and how the question will be asked to the resident, especially when Shamaka talked about residents who are not able to speak good English and English as their second language, and how many communities with different languages are we be working with this project?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to bring in Elizabeth first on the questions to communities on the cultures of evidence, and then perhaps Sharmake, you would like to comment on the how we're reaching lots of different people, and particularly those with a language barrier. So Elizabeth.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So the Cultures of Evidence project, the kind of the boundaries of the work are just within the council. So we're not actually speaking to residents as part of that work. It's meant to understand how internally within the council, different types of evidence, including evidence that come from residents, including kind of information from residents come. But this work itself will not be interviewing residents. But I think I'll pass over to Sharmake because a big kind of thread of this work is the participatory action research, which will train up community researchers, and there is a real drive, as I understand, to ensure that that opportunity is offered to lots of different types of community members.
Yes, so in terms of the training for residents, this will be done by Institute of Development Studies. So people will be trained to become participatory action researchers. And in terms of engaging with people from different communities or people who speak different languages, this will actually be supported by, interpreting, but also facilitation. So for example, let's say we have a group of people who speak Tamil. So the researcher, the idea will be that this researcher also will be able to understand or have a kind of working knowledge of the language, but also at the same time we'll have facilitators who speak the language who will actually be working with the group, because the way participatory action research works is actually engaging with everybody and taking everybody's opinion. And also I talked earlier on about the power structures. It actually takes away kind of, this is a council, this is IDS, or this, or I'm a resident. So, it's everything starts from a kind of equity level where people's opinions are actually valued more. So if somebody wants to speak in Tamil, we'll be able to facilitate that, or Gujarati, or any of those different languages. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to ask a question. Considering the levers that the council has to influence health outcomes, is there a risk of some of this being kind of collecting better evidence, which is interesting but doesn't feed into the areas that the council can actually manipulate.
So I think Councillor Newstead might want to come in this as well, but certainly in all of the building blocks of health and in our council health and wellbeing strategy, we do have an impact on all of those 7 building blocks of health and an impact on wider determinants, and we are part of a system that holds all of that. So whether that is a public sector system or whether that is our communities and our residents of the borough, we have a strong role to play in influencing that. And I'm sure there will be things that come out of this research that it is not in our gift to influence and change, but there are so many things that are. And I think that in a sense is why there is external funding for this sort of work, because it doesn't then rely on these collaborations being funded from organisations who only really are funded to do the things that they are doing themselves.
Thanks. Yeah,
is it possible to add to Amanda's comments? Absolutely. Yes, go ahead. Yeah, so the focus is actually on the building blocks of health, because as you know, this is a new strategy that is being set up by the council. And also if that particular strategy also follow the same kind of style of actually engaging with residents, engaging with all different stakeholders. So this, the participatory action research will actually support in terms of finding out what are the key issues, what are the reasons why people, for example, if I use mental health, we know there's a lot of communities that don't access mainstream mental health support for various reasons. So all this will come up, but also in terms of people will be trained, we'll be having actually a lot of participants from some of the civil society organizations. So this is actually a training that is kind of a legacy that this project can leave behind. And let's say that particular organization wants to do some kind of participatory action research on an issue that they think is quite important, they can actually utilize that kind of expertise that's already been provided. Thank you.
Thanks. And Councillor Newstead, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I think it's just that thing of you know, traditionally councils have done things to people and to residents based on what we thought was best for them. This is really flipping that on its head, and particularly powerful is the really important equity that we have with the other partners in this project. You know, this isn't you know, it's not us going out and doing surveys again, or you know, translating something into a couple of languages and thinking job's done. It really is about training up residents to be able to do their own research in their own communities and come up ideally with those solutions in collaboration with us. So it really fits in enormously to the wider work that we've been doing in our BCS community space, and the transformation work that Amanda's team have been doing to just get out and be part of our communities more effectively. And you know, we see that across a whole range of different areas of the council where that has to be what directs us, and we have to be collectively, and it's not an Ealing thing, you know, organisations, bureaucracy, administrations, governments have to be better at not only listening but really deeply listening and working with people at a very individual level to work out what the best ways are to help people solve their problems and to lead, you know, happy, healthy lives. So it's quite transformative, but isn't necessarily. I think it will become clearer as we kind of move out of the space of developing and framing and doing the governance into some of those projects, and we start seeing the individuals that will be trained up in order to be able to support us to be better at what we do.
Thank you. And yeah, looking ahead to the other streams that are part of the whole 5-year project. I mean, clearly it's good that it's a 5-year project, not a 2-year project or whatever, but is there nonetheless a risk that you know, the partnerships and so on that it sets up within the project in terms of the voluntary sector organisations like GOSAG, for instance, you know, working really closely as part of the project with the council? Is there a risk that when the 5 years comes to an end, you know, it might be working at its absolute most, most valuable, and then suddenly it's.
So I think my view on that would be that the HDRC programme has been very thoughtfully and carefully set up so that it is a 5-year programme, which leads us into a complete change in how we work that then becomes very sustainable. A lot of the initial work is about setting up the infrastructure and building the capacity and capability. That will not fade away. So a lot of the partnership agreements and a lot of the ways that we work will have a long time to bed in and a long time to be tested and a long time to build our trust and to test each other. So sustainability is sort of built into the model, I think. Don't know if any other colleagues.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, yeah. Actually, these are the kind of questions we were asking at the beginning. So when we got approached, we thought, okay, is it going to be just another, for example, you got the Let's Go South, I think, which has just come to an end. So having similar questions within the sector is something that has always been there. But what I liked about the HDRC program is that as we collect evidence, this will be for the first time something really tangible for the sector, because normally when we apply for funding, we ask for how do you establish the need for certain projects, So normally, because you don't have money, a lot of organizations don't have the resources or funds to bring in a researcher. We tend to actually work with what we have. But this way, we're able now to have proper evidence that everybody can use. All the different organizations, working in Ealing, are able to use that kind of information to actually apply for funding and come up with interventions, before the 5 years end. So, and also I think part of the outcomes, intended outcomes for the, by the end of the project is that, civil society organizations will be able to, access other sources of income or funding from outside. It doesn't have to be from Ealing itself. And just quickly, last thing is that, for example, you're leading on the, I think Amanda mentioned about part of the strategy looking at connecting communities. So we are leading on one of the consortia in Greenford, Northwood and Perivale. And this will be very, very useful because it means that we're leading a consortium of 9 organizations. So we are able actually to work together and use that kind of evidence to, maybe approach, Big Lottery or others. Thank you very much. Councillor Newster wanted to add something as well.
Yeah, I've forgotten what it was, but it is worth saying that it's been a pleasure to work with Shamaki, but to genuinely hear that commitment to us all working together and sharing that information, as well as our voluntary sector working together, which hasn't always been the case. There's a lot of chasing of funding and for different pots of money, and inevitably we are kind of a big sort of part of that ecosystem, and not always a positive one. I think it does shift a lot of the dynamics of how we'll work together in a really genuine way. And I think what I wanted to say is that some of this stuff's not going to be easy for us. It's not going to be, it's not going to be easy listening. It's not going to be, we know that there are things that we'd like to be doing better in our housing provision, in the way that we work with the NHS, and all sorts of ways that when we talk about those building blocks of health. There's no point in just sort of talking about them and putting them on a pretty slide if we're not prepared to really challenge and look at the way that we do things, working in conjunction with our residents. And I think we're up to that challenge, both organisationally and politically. So I think it's a really exciting time to be doing that.
Great. Yes, I think that's right. If a lot of this sort of really meaningful sort of cooperation as equals can be mainstreamed, then that adds, an enormous amount, even beyond the very valuable work that comes out of the project itself. Yes, Councillor Taylor, I'm seeing. Just anyone else indicating? Are we running towards the end of questions? We may be, but Councillor Taylor.
Okay, yes. Thanks. Yeah, no, I think this is a welcome project actually, and it's sort of Councillor Gordon and I are probably 2 experienced long-standing councillors. That's why we've both lost our hair. But we've often picked up issues over the years, often communities who've told us stuff, and it often felt like, if I'm being honest, having been in a cabinet position, I wanted to listen to other communities other than the ones that traditionally were getting funded as well. And I know particularly the Somali community, when our predecessor, Councillor Gillade, used to raise issues with me to go around Acton, it was like, how do I get my voices heard? And I know Shamak did a report, didn't you, during COVID as well? And he felt he was up against a brick wall at that stage, not being heard as well. So the fact he's welcomed it, I think it is a good thing in itself. The two practical things, one is, I mean, not suggestions or anything, I was just thinking about, often you get EQIAs attached to cabinet reports, and I'm wondering that somewhere along the line, some of this information will be part of that process, or when you produce cabinet reports as well. And I think the other thing on the levers thing, it's a building blocks, because I think Councillor Newsome alluded to it as well, is ultimately dealing with housing issues like overcrowding, damp and mould, is still going to be difficult, because that depends on funding, not just locally but obviously nationally as well. But at least we've got the evidence to say these are serious issues, affect certain communities more than others as well, because for whatever reason, at least that will at least help as well. So let's put more comments and questions.
Do you want to respond to that as a question? It is an element of commentary, but it's welcome commentary, I think. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely welcome commentary, and really agree with everything that you're saying. I think the cultures of evidence will very much look at where are the council basing their decisions. Are we doing things like EQIAs well, and are we taking in a range of evidence, or is it the same voices that we're hearing all the time in that decision making process? And I think the sense of how are we, when I first joined and talked to a lot of voluntary sector colleagues about that brick wall, and it's about trust and relationships. So the more we work together, the more we listen to each other, the more we do this research, the more those relationships build, and we can start hearing a wider range of voices, and more people will want to join in and talk to us. So very much welcome those comments. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. So not seeing any more indications for questions, so I'd like to thank Amanda and Councillor Newstub and Elizabeth and Sean McKay. And I'd just like to ask, are there any suggestions at this stage for recommendations arising out of anything in today's panel? Well, yes, that's right. There was that. Councillor Raza, you look like you're thinking about something.
Well, we spoke about getting updates, so I think that would be useful as a recommendation, I guess. But as this body is here for a year and then that's it, perhaps to OSE or something like that, where it might be helpful. I don't know. I'm just sort of thinking out aloud, really.
Well, a panel similar to this may go on longer. That's sort of not very clear whether we keep with the structure or whether it changes year by year now. But yeah, okay, great.
Updates
Thanks.
Would be helpful.
Updates would be useful. Certainly, we can work out whether you two. Good. Obviously, yeah, Councillor Haley and I afterwards can look through and identify some more, but just seeing if there's anything else that immediately arises. Oh yes, sorry, again, yeah.
Another thing that just sort of springs to mind, we're talking about different communities, but often, and I sit on the board of the Young Healing Foundation, is their youth voice, and to make sure that if we're looking at different communities that we're picking the youth voice out, as well as the usual sort of complex needs coming from the elderly. This is something that I think we need to sort of make sure that that's also considered.
So was that a recommendation to feed into this work sort of effectively? Yeah. Okay, great, thanks. Good. So that brings us to the end of the meeting. The date of next meeting is Tuesday the 29th of October. So I'll see members of the a long way away. I hope you all have a good summer before then. Yeah, have a good evening, everyone. Thank you everyone for very good contributions. Thank you. Thanks. Cheers.